you live from Ditka's here on Thanksgiving Day, a day for giving thanks for or taking punishment from a team that is known as the Bears.
The Bears.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another NFL Deep Dive episode. Today we have the 28th ranked Chicago Bears. And before we do dive into them, I want to say we're going to change up the order of how we're doing these videos just a touch, because I went through and did a game-by-game predictor for the entire NFL season to get a solid win total for these teams. This is going to help me sort out the power rankings, particularly because these next 16 teams or so are all pretty good. It's very congested. It's a deep year for the NFL. So to get that solid number of a prediction towards the end of the year is going to help me sort out to these teams. Real quick to rattle off the win totals for the last four teams I did. Jets get 1 win, Browns get 3 wins, 49ers get 3 wins, and the Rams get 4 wins. If you want to hear me elaborate on that, head over and watch those videos. And then I also want to mention real quick, we're doing another Twitter giveaway, free to play. This one's going to be John Ross, 99 speed, 97 overall, Madden Ultimate Team. This guy absolutely burns. I've already went in and played some games with him, and my God, you just got to chuck it up, let him run a 9 route, and he will score a touchdown almost every single time. To participate, head to Twitter at TFG_football, retweet it, and then you got to subscribe here on YouTube as well. So I expect everyone to participate. It's free to play. So looking forward to running another giveaway there. Now diving into the Chicago Bears, 28th in the power rankings. I actually tend to be a little higher on the Bears, at least before this offseason. Free agency, they don't really do anything. I don't like any of their signings. And then the draft. Obviously, the Mitchell Trubisky pick gets absolutely scrutinized. I didn't like it. I was not a Trubisky fan, as were few people. Not only that, but they pick Adam Shaheen in the second round, who I don't like. We'll talk about him later. And then third and fourth round picks were used to move up and get Mitchell Trubisky. If they would have made those moves to get Solomon Thomas, I'd be much more excited about this team, as they might have at least a awesome front seven, honestly. But that's not what they did. They get Mitchell Trubisky. I will give general manager Ryan Pace the benefit of the doubt, because he's done a pretty good job with this team, at least in terms of drafting. Last year was a great year with guys like Jordan Howard, getting the center Cody Whitehair. So a really good year, obviously, as well. They get Leonard Floyd, who had a very good year as a rookie. I'm not going to say Trubisky won't pan out, that he can't pan out. I just don't expect him to, but I guess we'll see. In terms of their win total, they came out to 4 wins for me. That is under their 5.5 point for Vegas, and then they are 100-1 to win the Super Bowl and 12-1 to win the division. Not taking either of those. I don't think they have a long shot chance for that. If anything, I think they might be competing for that number 1 overall pick. So taking a look at the depth chart now, you'll be looking at the Madden roster. There's going to be some differences, probably some players I mentioned that aren't on here. Some players just aren't in Madden, and I can't create everyone. I have videos explaining why, but the interface for Madden isn't perfect. At quarterback, we got Mike Glennon, should be the starter. They bring him in, and then Mitchell Trubisky there. They're going to have a competition. They're going to say Mike Glennon's their starter, but this reminds me a lot of Seattle when they brought in Matt Flynn in free agency, and then they drafted Russell Wilson. And Russell Wilson was killing it in the preseason, and they decided to make the move. I don't think Mitchell Trubisky is going to kill it in the preseason, but could he look better than Mike Glennon? Possibly, maybe even probably. If Mike Glennon doesn't have the feel of a veteran presence, a guy that can just run things while Mitchell Trubisky develops, then Mike Glennon's going to be the guy. Personally, I think this team's going to get impatient. I think Mitch Trubisky's going to start right away, just like we saw with, say, Blake Bortles, another 3rd overall pick that I thought was a huge reach. And then Mark Sanchez and Connor Shaw there on the depth chart, they will not be starting this year. Moving on to running back, this is Jordan Howard's backfield all the way. Totally impressed me last year. I mean, I'm always a fan of Big Ten running backs, but he was definitely better than I thought he would be. I thought he was really just a pure power back, kind of a goal line guy with a little bit of upside. I'm still not entirely convinced that he's going to be a top-notch, perennial Pro Bowl type of running back. I do think he has a great year. We'll talk about him in the fantasy section. And then Jeremy Langford, Kadeem Carey, the backups there. Benny Cunningham comes in. Can he be the third down back and relieve Jordan Howard, who's not great as a receiver, but not poor by any means? We'll see who gets a lot of snaps on third down. And then Tariq Cohen gets brought in from, I think it's NC A&M, and he's a fourth-round pick. He's like 5'6". They call him the human joystick. He's got a great highlight reel. Can he become the third down running back? Can he have in between the tackles potential? We don't really know what we're going to get from Cohen. Kind of a ballsy pick there, but I like him. He's fun to watch. Is it going to translate to the NFL? There's only time will tell. And then on to receiver, Cam Meredith. I love Meredith. Love the size, the speed. Pretty good route runner, good hands. Really no reason why he is not going to have a very good year other than the injury concern from this offseason. Sounds like he's going to be okay. It's just a thumb injury, I think. I don't think that's ever really hindered anyone's career. Unlike Kevin White, who just has had nagging injuries ever since he got drafted, I have absolutely no expectations for Kevin White. Anything the Bears can get from him at this point would be just house money, because I think a lot of people have already written him off. I kind of am in that boat. Marcus Wheaton gets brought in, so does Kendall Wright. These guys are going to compete for the slot position. I'm not a fan of Marcus Wheaton. I think Kendall Wright is going to challenge him for that. Whoever's playing in that slot, I think, is going to get a decent amount of targets. Deontay Thompson, Reuben Randall, and then Victor Cruz rounding out the depth chart. Victor Cruz might compete for that slot position as well. And then Josh Bellamy, pretty decent athlete. He has gotten a ton of playing time over the last year just because of injuries. So you could say this is a deep group. It's not a ton of high upside guys, but they at least have 6 or 7 guys that know how to get in there and play football. And then at tight end, Zach Miller, actually pretty good year. Really solid hands, decent athlete. They bring in Deion Sims to be that good, solid backup. And then they draft Adam Shaheen, who I already said I am not a fan of. When you turn on the tape of a massive human being playing at the D2 level, I expect to see them absolutely dominate, look like a freak of an athlete. And I didn't see that in Adam Shaheen. He looked slow to me at the D2 level. And he's like 280 pounds. He ran 4.840. People compare him to Gronk. I just don't see it. He is not fast. He doesn't have the blocking. He's not even close to the blocker Gronkowski is. I thought he was a bad blocker in D2. So I think this was a terrible pick. I don't think he's going to get much playing time. I think he's just going to totally bust. We'll see if I'm right. And then they also have Michael Pruitt, good athlete that has been brought on from Minnesota. And kind of a sleeper, Daniel Brown. Got some decent playing time last year after Zach Miller went down. He's been kind of buried on the depth chart now because of guys that have brought in. But this guy made some great catches last year. He comes in from Baltimore, who they have like 20,000 tight ends, so that's probably why he got cut there. I think Daniel Brown might be the second best tight end on this depth chart. So just a guy to keep your eye on there. The offensive line is, I think, better than people realize. I mean, Charles Leno at left tackle, he's fine. I mean, he hasn't been such an eyesore there that they've felt like they need to address that. He's not the long-term answer, but he's fine. He's a starting caliber left tackle. The interior guys are great. This is one of the best interior groups in the league. Josh Sitton, Cody Whitehair, Kyle Long. Love all those guys. And then Bobby Massey, kind of in the same boat as Charles Leno. Depth-wise, not a whole lot. They draft Jordan Morgan in the 5th round this year. Hronis Grasu, an intriguing prospect that just hasn't gotten the playing time. And then really nothing else to get too excited about there. Tom Compton comes in from Atlanta last year. And then Eric Kush, the Hard Knocks star, actually did play pretty well. I forgot to mention probably their best depth there. Played a lot when Josh Sitton got hurt, and the running game did not drop off at all with Eric Kush in there from Josh Sitton. And that concludes the offense. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, this front seven is definitely the best part of this football team. This is why I said if they took Solomon Thomas, I would have been really excited because across the board, they are really stacked. Akeem Hicks is one of the unknown stars of this league, really. Just never really was able to stay healthy, but a full healthy year with Chicago last year. Just kept popping off the tape, making huge plays, always winning his matchups on the D-line. Eddie Goldman, a really good nose tackle. Arguably the best true nose tackle in the game now with the drop-off of Vince Wilfork. And then Mitch Unrein set to start. This would have been Solomon Thomas's spot. The depth here, Jonathan Bullard, C.J. Wilson. The depth has dropped off a little bit, but they do bring in Jay Howard, who I think will probably split snaps with Mitch Unrein and John Jenkins in from Seattle. So those guys will all rotate, but I really like Hicks and Goldman on the D-line. At linebacker, they are really deep at outside specifically. Pernell McPhee, Leonard Floyd, probably the two best pass rushers in this group, but Willie Young also just continues to be underrated. He had I think it was an ACL or maybe an Achilles before this year, and he was an awesome third down pass rusher last year. Really effective, highly efficient. Lamar Houston, he's even started to bounce back. He's still making a ton of money from that free agent deal a few years ago. So these four edge guys, it's a shame that they can't all be on the field at once, but these guys are all really solid pass rushers. And then the inside linebacker position is good as well. Jarrell Freeman still kicking, and Danny Trevathan was doing well before he got hurt. I love Trevathan's game. Not a great athlete, but a really smart, instinctive linebacker. If this group is all healthy, it's going to be an awesome front seven. And the depth at middle linebacker, Christian Jones, John Timu, Nick Kwiatkowski, maybe? Tough name to say there, but deep group there. And then at cornerback, it's not good. Kyle Fuller, definitely their best corner. Just was not healthy last year, but almost a rookie of the year candidate when he was a rookie and just hasn't really stayed healthy. I think he's still a very good corner. I like Bryce Callahan a lot. He's kind of their nickel corner. He's got that feistiness. He's a really good athlete. Not going to really emerge as a star player or anything, but definitely a starting caliber nickelback. And then they bring in Prince Amukamara to be their third starter. Speaking of Madden stuff, my God, he's still like an 80 in Madden, and it drives me crazy. This guy's been released by 2 teams now. He's not an 80 overall, so just a player that just drives me crazy and a reason I do my roster. And he's now down here in the low 70s. Sharik McManus and Cravon LeBlanc, depth guys that played a little bit last year. DeAndre Hall, really good athlete out of Northern Iowa. Can he continue to develop and maybe become a long-term answer? They do bring in Marcus Cooper as well, so they're really just throwing darts at the cornerback position, trying to get at least serviceable guys behind that good pass rush. Jonathan Banks, I also did not mention, coming over from Detroit. At safety, they got Quentin Demps, veteran plug guy, just trying to hold that position until they can find an answer because they're not going to find it in anyone behind him. They got Harold Jones-Cordy, who pretty much started all of last year, very much a below replacement level starter. Chris Posinski, DeAndre Houston Carson, Deion Bush. None of these guys are really going to emerge to me as a good, strong safety. Adrian Amos, though, is a really good safety. I think I'd actually like him better if he could play in the box more of a traditional strong safety, but he is their free safety right now just because they don't have a deep cover guy. So maybe playing a little out of position, but I do like Amos, a really good athlete. Just his pursuit to the football, especially on like crossing routes and stuff, is great. So that concludes the look at the depth chart of the Bears. We're going to now talk about fantasy football, which is becoming a new focus of my channel. I love fantasy and I love talking about it. So starting with the quarterbacks, Mike Glennon and Mitch Trubisky, neither of them are ranked according to Fantasy Football Draft Calculator. You're going to take Trubisky in a dynasty league. You kind of just have to. Mike Glennon, any kind of a 2-quarterback system, you're probably going to end up drafting both of these guys, but later. I think if I have to pick one of them, I said earlier that Trubisky probably ends up starting, that this team gets impatient. So, gun to my head, if I have to take one of them, it's probably Trubisky, but it's really right on that line. I could also see a scenario where Glennon is okay and they let Trubisky develop, which, if that's the case, then Glennon actually might not be terrible. This offense wasn't terrible last year, so there might be points to be had there for Glennon, especially in a 2-quarterback league. So maybe take him ahead of some of those other back-end guys, ahead of like a Josh McCown or Cody Kessler. Moving on to running back, Jordan Howard is currently the 9th running back off the board, going in the middle of the 2nd round. And I think that's fair value for him. I think, he had 13 starts last year, managed 1,300 touchdowns. Wow, 1,300 yards and 6 touchdowns. I think he'll get somewhere around that yardage-wise. He did have an impressive 5.2 yards per carry. That probably comes down just a little bit. And the touchdowns, I think he gets between 6 and 8. So I think he'll end up around 1,300 yards and 6 touchdowns yet again. But that is returning value for the middle of the 2nd round. Definitely an RB1, bottom end RB1. And then no one else I'm really that excited about the running back position. Tariq Cohen, I would definitely consider him in a dynasty league. I think he's an intriguing prospect that has some upside, could turn into that Darren Sproles type. After that, Langford and Kadeem Carey would be kind of a split handcuff situation if anything happened to Howard. I wouldn't want to deal with that situation, so I'm not even going to keep my eye on either of them. Maybe in a full-point PPR, deeper league, Cunningham can become the 3rd down receiving back in this offense, so he might have slim value there. None of those guys I just named being drafted, by the way. At wide receiver, Cameron Meredith, I think, is actually being underdrafted right now. He's going at the end of the 10th round as the 40th wide receiver. I think Meredith's going to return wide receiver 2 value. This offense is better than people think. It was the 15th offense last year, I want to say, in terms of points per game, or actually that would have been yards per play is the stat I like to use for ranking offenses. Meredith is going as the 40th wide receiver. There is really no one that's going to compete with him for targets. I don't like any of the other receivers on this depth chart for fantasy, and Meredith could easily be getting towards 100 catches this year. I see him going over 1,000 yards. Touchdowns will be suspect, but he's going to be a PPR monster. I would take him in the 6th, 7th round. I think he's going to continue to rise as he gets healthy, but right now going as the 40th wide receiver, I think he's going to return wide receiver 2 value. And then Kevin White's the only other guy getting drafted as the 59th wide receiver in the 14th round. Way too high for me. There's guys that are going in that range that I would much rather take if we're talking about a dart throw, seeing to get a high upside guy. John Ross going right after him, Tyrell Williams, Josh Doxson, Kenny Britt, Alan Hearns. There's a bunch of guys getting drafted after Kevin White that I would much rather take. And then the other guys, I would have some interest for sure in whoever wins the starting slot receiver position if it ever becomes clear. You might be able to jump into the waiver wires if that situation becomes clear. And I'm talking about Marcus Wheaton, Kendall Wright, and Victor Cruz. There's going to be targets to be had. This team's going to be trailing a lot, so that slot guy could be getting a ton of catches. Your guess is as good as mine in terms of who wins that job. It'll probably be Marcus Wheaton, but I would not be surprised at all if it was Victor Cruz or Kendall Wright. At tight end, for some reason, Shaheen is going 23rd among tight ends. And, I don't think he's going to get much playing time at all this year. He's going to have to develop. He's sitting behind Zach Miller, who's a pretty solid receiving tight end. So if I'm drafting anyone, it's Zach Miller, and I would actually draft Zach Miller in a deep league, or if you need a second tight end, I think he's going to have a fine year. But yeah, Shaheen at 23rd among tight ends is way too high for me. I I wouldn't even touch him in a dynasty league, but if you are a fan of him, then sure, maybe he develops. So that concludes this video. That concludes the fantasy section. I hope you guys like this change of format, slight change. Keep letting me know what you think of these videos. Check out the Twitter giveaway for John Ross. And I'm looking forward to the upcoming videos because these teams are starting to get better and more interesting to talk about. So peace out, everyone. We'll see you for the next one.